Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam.
And I'm Marcia.
And we like World War II media, and we want to talk about it. Bob didn't remember jumping. At one instant, he could see the controls, along with the sound of metal popping, like somebody throwing pebbles out a window. He heard the engines and the sounds of fighting, and then time contracted toward the moment that he was sucked into the sky, and there was a torrent against his face and the rushing of air in his ears that hurled him end over end. And then it was calm and quiet, and he was plunging through the air, mouthing words that were taken by the wind. Heaven, this must be heaven. That's an excerpt from The Freedom Line, the brave men and women who rescued Allied airmen from the Nazis during World War II by Peter Eisner. It was published in 2004, about Bob Grimes, who was an American pilot shot down over Belgium in October of 1943. Today, we're going to be talking about Eisner's book, about airmen like Bob Grimes who were shot out of the sky and survived, and about escape routes like the Comet Line, the largest of several networks in Nazi-occupied Europe, wherein ordinary civilians risked their lives to help downed Allied airmen escape to neutral territory and safety.
And we have some guests for this podcast today. With us are actors Bailey Brook, who played Sergeant Charles K. Daly in Masters of the Air, and Guy Alexander, who played Sergeant William Quinn. Welcome, guys. Thanks for being on the pod.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Hello, thank you.
So cool. So we've met before. Nice to see you again. And
You too.
we heard you guys are nerdy, so we wanted to talk to you about some nerdy stuff.
Cool.
Love that.
Yeah, man.
Some context for those who haven't seen Masters of the Air, like my mother who listens to this podcast.
No, come on. No, she's got to watch it. She's got to watch it.
Yeah. Bailey and Quinn are on the same flight crew. They figure in Masters of the Air, but they are, of course, real people as well. They were on the same flight crew. Their B-17 bomber, Alice from Dallas, was shot down August 17th, 1943 on a bombing mission to a Messerschmitt fighter plane factory in Regensburg, Germany. So super topical for the Freedom Line of what we're going to be talking about today. Just to start us off, could we put you on the spot to tell us a little bit more about your respective characters? Bearing in mind, like I said, that a lot of people may not have seen all of Masters of the Air or might need a little brush up. And what did you learn about the real men, if anything?
Okay, so I play Sergeant William Quinn, as just previously mentioned, and he was a radio operator, specifically in the B-17. And he was from a place called Spokane in Washington State. For this particular mission that you just mentioned, the Regensburg mission, he, as far as our knowledge is aware, he was what they call a replacement on the crew. And that happened when a person had to drop out from the regular crew and they had these guys step in. So Quinn was a replacement for that particular mission. It's escaped me what number of missions that was for him, because it got to a point where you could leave the Air Force after you'd done a certain number of missions. But he was pretty early on to his tenure at that point. And yeah, I'm glad to say I'm now in touch with Quinn's family. Quinn's son, Corey, now also lives in Seattle, Washington State, but still in the same state that they were back in the day.
And I played Sergeant Charles K. Bailey, who was the right way gunner of the same plane. Alice from Dallas, again, as mentioned. He was from Oklahoma, a little town called, I never learned how to say it. It's either Winewood or Wynwood, but a little town near Oklahoma. He was one of the original crew, and I don't know what mission it was as well, but I get a vague memory that it was in its 10s, but not 25, because that was the first step until they increased it or something like that. Yeah, essentially down.
They went up to 50.
Yeah, they just kept pushing it up. Yeah, terrible. But yeah, and then he landed with a few of the airmen and then made it back through the Comet Line in real life. And you kind of get to see some version of that in the show, in particularly in episode 4, which is cool.
Yeah, really cool. Thanks, guys. Did you have any pre-existing interest in World War II? Did you learn anything researching for this show that surprised you or that was really cool?
Well, I think me particularly, I really enjoyed studying World War II in school, but we focused on sort of the very broad aspect of what World War II was for the world. But this show in particular, when I joined it and, specifically found out about Quinn's story, as Bailey briefly mentioned about the Comet Line and how we ended up back, that was a part of history that I knew nothing about. And diving into it for this was a great joy, because it, allowed me to realize that there were these incredible women who were sort of championing and rescuing so many downed airmen from both the US Air Force and the British Air Force, and bringing them back through to the UK, staring death in the face every single day, but successfully doing it. And they were so young, these 18, 19, and the Freedom Line was a book that I read, for research, and that took great pleasure in this part of history that I knew nothing about, and I don't think enough people do know about it.
Yeah, I agree. And similar to Kai in school, I was a massive history nerd and did that in A levels as well. But I just loved it so much. But the focus with us was the events kind of leading up to it, not necessarily the nitty gritty of the war period, but just how America got involved and potentially why and for what reason and whatnot. And then kind of like the post-war Germany with the effect of the Soviet Union and America in there, to kind of like butting heads over this land that was now Germany, this reformed country, if you will. So I learned everything around it, but nothing particularly about the events that transpired in World War II, particularly the airmen, the Air Force. I never knew anything about that, so it was fascinating. But I'd seen a lot of war films. I mean, I grew up from the age of like 5 watching films that were way too above my age rating, but including like your Saved Private Ryan's and Band of Brothers and, all these brilliant war films that tell you the stories of these brave men. But as Camille mentioned, what you don't see very often is the sort of subplots, if you will, of the comic line and the bros, young, particularly women, but also men who risk their lives within occupation to get the airmen back to the country safely. So that was just, it was gorgeous to be able to explore that on this, and that was definitely brand new to me.
I mean, that's always the piece for us too, right? Like, we love talking about women's history around World War II, and I'm always finding new stuff out, and I feel like I've read so many books and done so much research, and I'm constantly finding out new things that just didn't get any light shed on it,
Absolutely.
And then you got to be a part of a show like Masters of the Air, which must be really cool if you're a history nerd. And
Absolutely.
I do have a question about this, and I kind of already know the answer because I've been on tour with you. But as far as I know, your roles grew quite a bit since you were first cast. Was that true for both of you, or just for you, Bailey? Can you, as if I don't already know the answer, can you tell us about your roles?
Yeah, I know kind of a slightly different experience, but I think the thing that we kind of shared is we never really knew how deep into the story we were going, or how much you would see and the events that would transpire. So I mean, pretty blind. I mean, we all kind of most of us read for different parts, they got different parts, and it was like a couple of months in the process. And I signed on for I think it was like 3 lines or something, and one of them was Toss the Salt, which is
One?
one of my favourite. It's 3 because I had the Cowl runway bit as well.
Oh, the Cow of the Rumble. Yeah.
So it's like Toss the Salt, the Cowl of the runway, and which was just, I was buzzing with that. I was just fresh out of drama schools, and we'd just come out the first wave of COVID, so like to get anything coming out of drama school was just, and especially on a show like Masters and like you say, being into history and stuff, like it was a dream first job anyways. And then 2 weeks in, me and Kai got pulled into a meeting with our director, and they just basically were talking about where it was going to go. And I still didn't believe it. He was talking to us, and he was telling us stuff about Comet Lines and, spies and all this like stuff, like cool stuff. And I was tied up. I was even white. I was like, I don't really know what this means. I didn't quite believe it. I thought this was going to be on. And then lo and behold, we just getting pulled in and getting sent versions of scenes, and it kind of grew into what is now episode 4.
And do you know if that was because new information was available, or was it already in the books,
I've never got to the bottom of it. I mean, Charles and Quinn aren't particularly described in loads of books, although Quinn wrote something, right? Am I making that up? I don't know how much they had to begin with. I found that mission report that I shared with you, that was halfway through. Yeah. And that was of my own, we found it ourselves. I knew coming in there was going to be something. I didn't know to what end that was going to be. So it started being created. Quinn was very new when I auditioned for Quinn. So I knew at that point there was going to be something. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what the story of Quinn was, because even when I read through it, I had Quinn. And I didn't have William Quinn, so I couldn't dive in specifically to who he was. So I knew there was going to be something, but I didn't know specifically what.
Right. So no rabbit holing for you then beforehand, just during.
Bailey and Quinn are fortunate enough to encounter sympathetic civilians who hook them up with members of the escape network. And in a what I would say is a pretty memorable scene. Quinn is told that if he turns himself into the Germans, he'll merely be taken to a POW camp, but if he gets caught trying to escape, he might be shot. And the Germans considered anyone wearing civilian clothes, whether they're dog tags, to potentially be spies rather than combatants. If that sounds illegal, kind of. So I would just love your thoughts on why airmen or so many airmen anyway, would make that extremely risky decision. I know we can't know for sure, but like, what are your thoughts on why Quinn did?
I think ultimately, when you land, you know you're in danger, and you are, we're there in the air. We're fighting for Western civilization. So to be captured by them, I wouldn't say is ever, that's not your immediate thought process is to escape. And I think everything is new every single second that you land, because you're in a place where you don't know, you've never been there before. And there are so many variables. I think you just constantly, step by step, taking each moment as it comes. And some are fortunate to end up one way. Some, I don't think you ever have a conscious choice when you land to go, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I think, steps and things lead to each other.
I was just thinking about the fact that they didn't even get any parachute training. You might land and after your first time ever jumping out of a plane and you don't speak French or Dutch or German.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually. I'd forgotten that. And when we actually, there was a parachute jump that didn't make it into the final cut that we did. And one of the interesting things about it was remembering they didn't, that jump itself, that landing was completely new to him because they hadn't done any parachute training. So it was all, to not know what you were doing was a really interesting thing to use.
I was just going to add, I do wonder if these guys got into a plane and they were taking a huge risk already. Living or dying was very much in the balance already. So maybe that's another thing where the risk of dying isn't necessarily one that scares them as much. That would be another reason to try and escape.
I was literally just thinking the same thing, pulling off Mark. I was, kind of reflecting on the that actually, but if let's say you're on your 10th mission or something, you've probably seen a fair bit of bloodshed and you've seen people not come back, and you've spent 10 missions or so in this tin camp, you're getting, absolutely battered by flak and bullets and everything, and every single day that you're alive, it's so precious. And the fact that you land in the countryside and there's people wanting to help you, I think the idea of going to a Nazi-controlled prison camp is 10 times more terrifying than the idea of just trying to get back. And you've risked so much already. And also, the idea you're going to go to this camp and no one knew what they were, no one knew what they looked like. You didn't know how much to even respect your human rights. Do you know what I mean? And like, maybe risking your life, like you say, one more time isn't such a bad thing.
I think to just lead on from that briefly, what you just said, Bailey, is that landing was a success. You when you're in a plane and you know the risks and you know that you're staring death in the face up there, and when you're hit, you've got an engine problem, or you're going down, you've got to parachute out. So many people were not able to make it out, and particularly with the Hinton thing, a lot of people didn't make it out. So to actually land successfully was a huge something to take in itself. That was a huge moment.
Small victory, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So they both make a choice to evade instead of be captured, and that isn't without risk. And that's also not without risk for the civilians on the Comet Line, because the Comet Line was frequently infiltrated by the Nazis. So there's a scene that you do where you are interrogated by the Comet Line, and it's a funny scene. Also, if they were found to be infiltrators anyway, they would go on what they called a long walk in the woods. And we see that in the show as well. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that scene, about the interrogation scene and what we see there.
Yeah, do you want to start, Kai?
No, you go for it, Bay.
We
had a lot of fun on that one.
Yeah, it was a weird thing. It was kind of fun. Obviously, it's so serious, but there's something very funny about it, because obviously what we kind of learned, it wasn't really scripted the way we did. The scene was in there, but then like the national anthem, for example, was very much on the day. We thought it was a joke, and then Carrie, the director, was like, "No, we go learn it." It's like I think he said to Barney, who plays Bob, "Learn it perfectly. me learning it incorrectly. What did he say to you?
I did that. We didn't.
He didn't say anything. No. Well, I learned it incorrectly.
Yeah. Whether I didn't hear it or not, I didn't remember. We'd started shooting the previous first section of the script, which is the interrogation, before we get to the anthem. And we got to like, okay, let's sing the anthem. And I was like, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, whereas like, to be fair, in Barney's credit, a fantastic actor, but he learned it word perfect in about maybe 30 minutes. Like, it was insane, and I couldn't if I tried. Luckily, I got the better end of the stick and had to learn it incorrect anyway, so I struggled through it. But it was more of a case of like, we looked around and the camera the team was like, Americans here, the team followed in the national anthem, and people were like sort of between like 70 and 90%, but there's an uncertainty there anyways. You know, there's a kind of truth in there, like the fallible human, the fallible American, like sort of getting it wrong too and struggling. And you see Quinn kind of like, you know, trying to remember through it a little bit, and then Bailey kind of doing the same thing, Barney getting it word perfect, sorry, Bob. But it was really, really fun. And like the questions about baseball and stuff like that, those were the sort of questions that they asked, because it was more about like culture rather than, you know, very scientific questions, if you will. It was more about proving if you're American by the way that you are. And not, you know what I mean, what you've been taught, things that you learn to say. It's very smart, and it comes across as very fun. It is a very funny scene, but actually I think there's a lot of beauty and intelligence behind it.
Yeah, the Comet Line had a British lady helping them identify errors in the English to see if there were any Germans in the Comet Line. Mm-hmm. And it's so wild to me that stuff like that, it's stuff you don't think about, but it would give you away. Even just being too perfect. There's
a wonderful little detail on the paper, the 7. And I wasn't aware of this until they asked, because we did a lot of, because obviously there's the shot of me, my writing. And I actually naturally write a 7 with a line through it. And that is a German 7. And that's a little detail that's in there.
What?
So, yeah, so the 7 with the line through it was a German 7. So Barney, who plays Bob, does that, and that's one of the little giveaways.
I didn't notice. I also write a 7 with a line for it. I'm not German, but I am Dutch. So
whether it's specifically German, but it wasn't. It was not.
Not non-American, yeah, I suppose.
Cool. That's it.
It reminds me of being not to plug another film, but Glorious Bastards, when he does the German 3. Yeah. A bit like that.
Yeah,
that's what I need.
They would have problems too, right? Because before the war, Hitler had issued a call for all Aryans to return to the fatherland. And so there were men who had grown up in the United States who had gone back to Germany before the war. And so they would have spoken perfect English, you know? They would have known the answers to a lot of these questions.
So true, yeah.
And what can you remind us what happens to Bob?
Yeah, Bob suffers the consequences of being an infiltrator, which there were so many of, as is discussed in the Freedom Line. Because it was so successful, the Nazi regime was so determined to bring it down, and they were constantly trying to get people in there to tear it apart, to expose it, to understand its workings. So this was something that they were used to, and what they were trying to discover when they interviewed us and interrogated us.
And Bob's head explodes because of it.
Bailey's blonde detail and Bob's head explodes.
Okay, that was a stage direction. That was the action. Bob's head. Bob's head just explodes.
I just remember us hyperventilating when we saw it. That was so funny because we were sort of there watching that. The shot of us turned around is like, whoa, what's happened? And we did that quite a few times, and we were sort of doing this. I think it's said in the script like heavy breathing.
Heavy breathing. Yeah.
And we've done this a lot of times, sort of really sort of gasping, and then we were about 10 takes in. And I turned to Bailey and I'm like, "Hey, you feeling a bit funny?" And he goes, "Yeah, feeling a bit dizzy." I was like, and then we did about another 5 takes. And by the end of it, I think the shot of us that they used was us like
nearly dead,
completely like dazed, because we sort of starved ourselves of, is it oxygen? Do we start?
Yeah.
Something oxygen.
Because so it was something.
Yeah, and we were like the science. We didn't do science very well, as you can tell.
Good news, sorry. Yeah, we don't know how.
We nerds, not science nerds, unfortunately. But yeah, we were spaced out by the end of it.
Yeah, I turned to you and said that I couldn't feel my lips.
Yeah.
It was good.
It's definitely a really, when he gets shot, it's very startling to watch. I'll tell you that.
But that's it. I kind of wish when we watched that episode that I could have not known. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, that's the problem with being in it, I guess, in it. Like, it's such an honor and privilege. But bloody hell, like, to watch that without knowing, reading it, obviously was a bit shocking, but seeing it, dude. And when we were there, obviously, it doesn't. Apart from the fact that obviously they have to use a kind of stunt thing going on, which obviously kind of takes you out of it for a second. Like the actual, you know, how bad it looks was terrifying. Blood and everything like that. And for me,
the way they did that, they had this explosion wired into him, didn't they? Remember that?
It was like
A large splatter radius, and you know, it was flung everywhere. It was very realistic. But
I feel like the entire escape or the entire walk up to that too is very tense. Like it's really well done, and you can kind of feel the fear of not knowing what's going on in their scene. So it's really well done, I think.
Yeah. And
you kind of already mentioned it, but a lot of the people in the Comet Line were women, and I want to just talk about one of them really quickly. Andre de Jong, whose code name was Day. She was a woman, and she was the first head of the Comet Line. Up to 70% of the civilians that were part of the Comet Line were women, so that's a lot. Out of the 3,000 civilian participants, 700 of them were arrested, and 290 were executed or died in prison or concentration camps. So this job was not without risk for these civilians. We meet some of them in Masters. There's two that I remember. One of them is called Michu, I think, and one of them is called Manon. And we're very glad to see them. We wish they had more time on air, obviously. But could you tell us a little bit about the scenes that you spent with them?
You know, Anne and Leonie, you know, wonderful actresses. We had a great time filming with them, you know, and I remember going to it's the first time we met Leonie in the house. I think it was, wasn't it?
yeah,
You know, just sort of meeting Leonie there for the first time in that house. And it was I just remember feeling him really like in the zone. Everything about that particular house. We were all in costume. I think we were in costumes by the first time we met, and it was like, whoa, this feels really authentic. And the same with when we met Anne on for the train. Just they're great. They do a great job. They're amazing actresses.
They hold so much power. Yeah, sorry, I was going to say they hold so much power with what they have. They do such a fantastic job of that. And again, particularly, you know, being young, I think Mishu younger, but nonetheless, these young women having so much power. You see that in the Belgium scene, like you see it, and especially how Leonie plays it. It's like it's incredible, and not power as a bad thing, not as like a power play, but just they've grown up 10 times faster than people would nowadays. They've had to, a bit like the men, I guess, but. Yeah, and they did a fantastic job of that. And I think it was very important that got captured. Although I agree, I think I'd have loved to have seen a lot more of them, but I think it was good that got captured.
You see their youth, but the moment they are our escape. They are our tickets. You know, we are total all of them. You know, and there's that beautiful initial introduction where I think Quinn says, "Is she going to do what's that?"
You know, because Bailey says she's barely a teenager,
and that's your guide. And it was we turned into two little boys. You know, we are really. As soon as we go on it, that's what we are. You know, we are completely. We have no idea.
Yeah, you're at their mercy at that point. You're like, here's my life, help me out. It must be really, for me, it's really hard to imagine. Like, I remember being 20, but to try and put yourself in that position, I can't even imagine myself doing that.
Well, I think especially when you think about the fact that, I mean, for example, like particularly in like the Netherlands and Belgium and places like that, a lot of the men had been sent away to do forced labor for the Germans. And so the women were left behind, and they were, determined to make an impact in some way. And so they would have these men stay in their home, or they would ferry them from place to place, knowing that doing that might not get you killed. It might also get your whole family killed or disappeared by the Germans, and you never find out what happened to them.
Yeah, and there's no protection for them. Like, if you're an airman and you get captured in your uniform, at least there's the Geneva Convention. But if you're helping airmen who have been downed, then you just get, like you said, disappeared. So it's bad for sure.
Yeah, as I said, all of those things, when we discovered them leading up to filming this, I was just amazed that I didn't know about it before, and how, as you say, people didn't know about it. When we filmed the show, and you started briefly talking about what storyline you were involved in, and the Comet Line is just something that's not known about, but the sheer amount of people that it saved is incredible. So yeah.
I would say my favorite part of the book, The Freedom Line, is the whole part where I think it's Day, like right at the beginning, she takes a couple of airmen, and we can't underestimate how far this was, from like Belgium or the Netherlands across the Pyrenees, like into Spain, to get them to Gibraltar, where they could be evacuated to England. And if you look at a map, that's quite a distance. And the first couple airmen to be rescued, like Day just did it herself. She just walked these guys across the Pyrenees. And at first, they, on the British Embassy, they weren't taking her that seriously. And then she kept bringing more guys. And finally, they were like, all right, well, how do we get involved here? Like, how do we assist this effort? But it's just just even reading the passages about them just passing through the mountains in the dark, wild. Like,
rivers. I remember reading them when they go through rivers at night, and they lost some people on that. There's a few of them, they lost them because of the currents, the dangers of crossing the river at night to avoid being seen.
So her Masters of the Air, Donald Miller's book, by War's End in Europe, flak had taken down 5,400 American planes, while 4,300 were shot down by fighters. So that would include fighter planes where there was just the pilot inside, but it would also include a lot of bombers where there's a crew of approximately 10 people if it's a B-17. And Bailey and Quinn were among the approximately 5,000 Allied airmen who escaped back to England. Can you tell us what was next for them and for any downed airmen who made it back?
Yeah, they had to be sent home, especially if you survived via the Comet Line, which obviously is kind of the only route. But you couldn't fly again because there's too much risk of you being captured again and then revealing secrets and being interrogated, and then endangering the lives of thousands of men, as you say. So they had to send home, and you kind of see that in episode 7. You see a little farewell to them coming home. But that was an immediate thing.
Yeah, it was too risky for them to fly again.
Yeah, it's kind of wild to me because I do feel like probably a lot of the people who were rescuing airmen were obviously doing it for altruistic reasons to save lives, but also there was probably some thought like, if we get them back, then, they don't have to train another pilot. People are very like resource intensive to train and get ready. And then it's like, oh, they get back and they actually have to be reassigned. Like, not that they'll be necessarily leaving the army, but they won't be able to fly again. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure they kept within. They went back to America, we know that, and then they started families a bit later on when the war ceased. But between that, before the war came to an end, I'm sure they had some landing. I never received any document about that, but some form of, like you say, training or something like that.
Yeah, he stayed for a long duration.
I'm going to make a bit of a switch here because you guys recently went on tour, and you went twice, buddy. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that was like seeing all the places that Bailey and Quinn would have been at, and seeing like a memorial and all that sort of stuff? Can you talk to us about it?
Yeah, I loved it. Specifically, I love both. So I went to one in Cambridge that you run as well, Matcha, and then the Belgian one as well. The Cambridge one, seeing Thorpe Abbots was a highlight for me, man. And it's so strange as well because obviously they recreated it for us to film it. So it was seeing the real thing and kind of, looking at hard stands where these guys actually were. It was mental. Like you just watching like the show and then also a version that you kind of created in your head, just kind of, blend into reality when you're like looking around. It was amazing, man. Even the sky and the Norfolk sky, it was so surreal to be there. So I was very grateful to be invited onto that. And the Belgian one particularly cool. Yeah, I'd never been to Belgium before. So a new land for me, which is nice. And the memorial, very emotional. I thought that was incredible to sort of pay respects to Babyface Hinton, and also just, just to be present for them unveiling a memorial to Alice from Dallas as one of the many, many planes that was kind of lost. The planes were kind of people, you know what I mean? It's crazy. Like we don't really have that anymore, I don't think. Like maybe because of media and stuff like that, but I think the ownership of an object was so special then, and especially this thing that you're gonna survive in for a long time or you're going down. Like, it's like, you kind of soared to it in that way. And I think we, not to be pretentious or anything, but I think we kind of getting that on set with Alice from Dallas. I made like a little saying as a group and stuff, and like just to form that sort of an emotional connection with that. And then to like fast forward when we filmed it, Kai, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, fast forward all this time, and then to be able to be present at that and see all these speeches and, and these beautiful words being said, and then to touch the parts of Alice from Dallas that were from the plane. It's just like it's a gorgeous full circle.
Visiting Ardennes Cemetery and seeing, because obviously when you're acting, you aim for as close to reality as possible. That's what you aim for. But ultimately, you still know that you are filming something, you're making a television series. But to visit Ardennes and see Babyface's stones, it really became very real. And the moment I saw it, it was really quite deep, because it brought it to life. Although, as much as we knew these people were real and much as we knew how, authentic, to the smallest detail, everything that we did was true, to see it in reality and to see Babyface's headstone was quite a moment.
I thought the safe house was also really wild to see. With the Germans being right on top of them, like how does that even happen?
With the thing with was it the toaster?
I don't remember.
Didn't they? The kitchen. They moved something in the kitchen every day.
Oh, yes.
Or the right, and one of those things indicated whether the Germans were in or not.
Yeah, wild.
Yeah,
incredible.
That was
so
incredible.
Yeah. I just you can.
I was just going to say, just to like follow us from sort of, walk the footsteps for real in a lot of ways, and that's it.
I was just going to ask, is it weird being on tour with all these fans of the show? But also,
wonderful.
I don't know if you realize, but they're such nerds. Like, all of them are such history nerds.
So weird. It's amazing to see so many people, like I said, go into this with the story that I would tell. I wanted, one of the most amazing things that we could do was to bring this story to more people. And then to see so many people, how they've engaged with it and how they've responded to it, it's a really touching thing.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's very clearly impacted our lives in very positive ways. It's in mine and Kai's. And then to be, I don't speak for you, Kai, but like to be on tour with people who, in whatever way, shape or form, has impacted their lives as well. It's just like a beautiful thread. Do you know what I mean? It felt very nice. It felt that we all shared something, a passion and an appreciation for something. And it just led to a very nice, lovely experience, in my opinion. I loved it.
Yeah, we watched a documentary. I don't know. Do you remember what it was called, Mart? It's called
Last Best Hope.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Jinx.
What is it?
Last Best Hope.
Last Best Hope. And that's a documentary.
Yeah. You can find it on YouTube if people are interested in watching it. It basically follows an airman who'd been rescued. He's quite a bit older now. He's like in his 70s or 80s. And he goes back to meet some of the ladies that are still alive from who helped rescue. And they interview them all. And it's obviously still so profoundly emotionally affecting for all of them. I mean, the gentleman is crying. The ladies were crying. Like, it was really it's a powerful watch. I definitely recommend it.
You've just
definitely watch.
Reminded me of something, because I'm pretty sure Quinn wrote to the Belgian family who helped us. And so they were in contact. Corey, his son, told me that. And I only found that out very recently.
Right.
Yeah, they must have such a strong bond, right? It's such a life-changing, life-saving relationship that you have with those people.
That's it, isn't it? Like, you could be the most opposite person from somebody ever, and you could have the most opposite kind of like political, social opinion or whatever. But it's like if you save somebody's life, well, that's crazy. Like, there must be some sort of everlasting bond there, like when you owe that to somebody, and you've got this like shared thing. It's like, I saved you and you maybe allowed me to save you in some ways. You trusted each other for that period of time. It's gorgeous, man. And that's something I think in a lot of art that will just continue to thrive, you know what I mean?
It's like our bond thing, everlasting.
It's like a bond, despite actually hating each other. It's crazy, isn't it?
That's not true. No, we don't hate each other.
Just super big.
Just water.
Everlasting.
Do you guys have any World War II book or movie recommendations? Or if you have any recommendations you're thrilled about that aren't World War II, we'd love to have those too.
I'll tell you something that I watched leading into this was Five Came Back documentary. It's on Netflix, and it follows the wonderful directors who went to the front lines, John Ford, William Wyler, Frank Capra, George Stevens. They film and produce this incredible footage that they capture. Is incredible. So that's a great documentary.
I've seen that one. It's if people don't know the impact that propaganda had on World War II, it's really interesting in that respect.
Yeah, for sure.
I would always say Saving Private Ryan, I think, is one of the best war films ever made. I think it's incredible. And also shameless, plug to one of our producers. Yeah, it's fantastic. And what else? I watched, when I was watching Masters, I watched Red Tails. Seen Red Tails?
Yeah.
Is there more than one? I only watched one.
No, there's not. One is called Red Tails, and the other one is called the Tuskegee Airmen. And
Red Tails, yeah. Oh, Red Tails, that's the one I watched. And I thought it was just really, really good. I just thought it was really good. And also, Tuskegee, obviously, Nexus touched on it a little bit. But to have a film dedicated to Tuskegee, I thought it was incredible. So I'd recommend that to anyone as well.
Do you guys have anything that you want to plug? Any projects you're working on? Anything you want to tell people to check out?
Like myself.
I've got a show coming out later this year called Department Q on Netflix. And I'm about to start something else tomorrow, actually. Which is a very interesting film about, set in the exact same time period, actually, about women who got unlawfully sectioned because of having typhoid. So it's really interesting. Looking forward to starting that.
That sounds good.
It does sound interesting.
Yeah, very cool, mate.
Yeah, it's a story, actually. They only found out much later on in the years. It's based on a BBC Newsnight expose, which I think was from 2008, about that. And there was this place in Epsom, which was an asylum, and they just sectioned a load of people for having typhoid. It's crazy. Yeah.
Mark, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask?
I'm trying to think if I forgot anything, but I don't think so. I think this was a really good conversation already. So,
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Bailey and Kai. This has been great.
Thank you.
You can watch Masters of the Air on Apple TV. You can follow Rosie the Reviewer wherever you get your podcasts. You can rate us 5 stars if you want to. You can visit our website, rosieTheReviewer.com, and you can follow us on Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer Podcast.
thanks for listening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.